This video is part 4 of the year in wrestling 1988 coming at you right now. This will be the last video I'm doing on 1988, only talking about the NWA and WWF. I'm going to kick it off. First off, it's very hot out. Feels like 90 degrees. Feels like about 80 where I'm at in my house right now. But anyways, it's very hot and humid outside. I do not like this weather. It sucks. I don't like humidity. It sucks. And hot and humid does not work for me. Yeah, I like the summer, but I don't like super hot days where it's really too humid, and it is. I would rather have it be 50 degrees out, 50 or 60 or 70 with no humidity. Anyways, I'm not a weatherman. You're not watching this video to get the weather reported to you. It's very hot and humid, but who cares? I'm going to continue and do this video without a fan on, because a fan would just mess up the video. Before I talk about some of the Saturday night main events that took place in 1988, I believe five Saturday night main events took place in the year 1988. So I'm going to kick it off with talking about some of the main events, some of the Saturday night main events for 88. First one was in January of 88. You had a couple of the matches was Jake the Snake versus one of the Wild Samoans. I believe it was Alpha. His name was Alpha. Took on Jake the Snake. I don't remember who won. And then I'll talk about the main event of the January 88 Saturday Night's main event was King Kong Bundy versus Hulk Hogan. Still had the WWF title at the time. And in February, of course, he lost it to Andre because Ted DiBiase basically stole the title and screwed Hogan and bought the WWF title, and then he was stripped of it. And as everybody out there knows, then you had the WrestleMania 4 championship tournament because Ted DiBiase was stripped of the title because Andre gave it to him, basically. King Kong Bundy versus Hogan was a decent, normal Hulk Hogan match. Hogan basically took on a big man. King Kong Bundy was another monster for Hogan to basically defeat, and basically King Kong Bundy put over Hogan, and they wrestled all over the country and in Canada, and I don't ever remember seeing King Kong Bundy ever defeat Hogan, maybe by a count out, maybe once or twice. Who knows? But Hogan defeated King Kong Bundy all the time. In just about every match they had, Hogan win over. But it was a decent main event for a Saturday night's main event. It was on free television, so that's good anytime you got to see Hogan wrestle. And King Kong Bundy, he had a hell of a look in the 80s, and he became a big star and well-deserved. And I believe King Kong Bundy should get and be in the Hall of Fame in the future because he deserves it. Next Saturday night's main event, you had it was in February. It wasn't a Saturday night's main event, but it was called the main event. The main match was Hogan and Andre for the title, and if you don't know what happened, look it up on Wikipedia or online. I'm just going off the top of my head here, and I'm just going by memory. March 88 was another Saturday night's main event. Just off the top of my head, matches I remember happening. Macho Man Randy Savage took on Ted DiBiase. It was a decent match. It was a good match. It was entertaining. I don't remember who won, but it doesn't really matter who won. Another match, March, Saturday night's main event, was Hulk Hogan versus King Harley Race. Was an entertaining match, and Harley Race did a very insane spot. I don't think Harley knew the table was not gonna break totally in half. And Hogan was laying on the table. Harley put him on a table on the outside of the ring. It was not a gimmick table. Harley Race laid Hogan out on it. Went up to the ring apron. Came down like this. Came down. I guess he was gonna splash Hogan, or big splash on Hogan. He missed. Hogan got off the table. Harley Race missed. Cracked the table. Basically it bent like this. It did not break because there's not a gimmick table. And that is funny as hell. It was funny as hell to see that spot and Harley Race go through that table and it did not break. That was very funny. If you have the WWE Network, watch the March 88 Saturday night's main event, Harley Race versus Hogan, to see Harley Race trying to break that table that was not a gimmick table. It's funny as hell, and it's well worth the watch. I think every time I see Harley Race go through that table and it does not break, I always laugh. And I'm not disrespecting Harley Race. I just think it was a funny spot. And I don't know what Harley Race was thinking. He thought the table would break or it would not break. Who knows? But it looked like it hurt like hell. So Hogan, Harley Race was on the March 88 Saturday night's main event, and Macho Man versus Ted DiBiase was also on the March 88 Saturday night's main event. Those are the only two matches that I remember. Another Saturday night's main event after WrestleMania, I believe it happened in April of 88. I'm not sure if it was April or May, but Macho Man was the champion, defending the WWF title against the One Man Gang. Decent match. Macho Man, basically, I never saw Macho Man Randy Savage have a bad match, so it was good. And he was defending the title. I believe it was his first title defense. Okay, the other Saturday night's main event, I believe one happened in November and maybe October. I don't have the matches in front of me, and I didn't bother to look them up. Sorry about that. But there's 5 Saturday night's main event. There's 5 of them on the network. So if you got the network, check them out, and you'll see all the matches on them. Up next, I'm going to talk about just a couple facts about 1988 that I have in front of me. On October 17th, Forbes magazine reported that the World Wrestling Federation was worth $100 million. At the time, 1988, WWF was reported on being worth $100 million. That's pretty damn impressive for it being the late 80s. WWF being worth $100 million. That's damn impressive. And in 2015, I believe they're probably worth $800 million, maybe $900 million. So from 88 to whatever 88 was, 27 years ago, was 27 years ago, 1988 was, to now 27 years later for WWE to be worth like 800 to 700 more $1 million. That's damn impressive. And I'm really glad WWE came out with a WWE network finally. So October 17th, 88, WWF was reported being worth $100 million. That's damn impressive. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the attendance at the shows and the pay-per-views of 1988. SummerSlam 88 drew 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden. It was a sellout. Basically, every pay-per-view that is at Madison Square Garden that you have seen is always a sellout. New York City fans, WWE, WWF, New York City fans love the WWE, and they always come out and sell out the Garden. So, 20,000 for SummerSlam, 88. Survivor Series, 88. In Richfield, Ohio. Yes, Richfield, Ohio. Drew 13,500. I don't know if that's a sellout, but it's pretty many people, and I'm sure the arena was a tiny bit small, so to draw 13,500, it was probably a sellout. I don't know. Starrcade, 88. In Norfolk, Virginia. Drew 10,000 people. That's pretty impressive for the NWA at the time. And Virginia being in the South, 10,000 is a good crowd because the South loved the NWA, and the NWA always drew well in the South. That's where they started, basically. AWA had a show in December of 88. It was a pay-per-view, I think. It was on pay-per-view, maybe it was not. But it was Super Clash 2. AWA held Super Clash 2. It was held in Chicago. And it was a tiny crowd. Not a good crowd at all. AWA at the end of 88 was dying a slow, painful death. The AWA was basically dead at the end of 88. And in a good wrestling city, great wrestling city like Chicago, to draw 1,672 people is pathetic for the AWA. Vern Gagne at the time and the AWA at the end of 88 did not embrace what WWF was doing. I don't think Vern Gagne wanted to be sports entertainment at all, and he did not want to change with the times at all. So the AWA was basically dead and dying. And to draw 1,672 people in a great wrestling city like Chicago is pathetic. Anyways, that was the attendance for the last 3 big shows at the end of 88. Of course, WWF outdrew the NWA basically every single year in the late 80s and early 90s and beyond. Okay, now I'm going to talk about pay-per-views. I'm going to talk about the Survivor Series 88 pay-per-view event from the WWF. This was the second Survivor Series on pay-per-view. And Ricky Steamboat was not, as I said in my past videos, he was not on SummerSlam 88, and he was not on Survivor Series 88. Steamboat left the WWF, and basically it was over a contract dispute with Vince. So Steamboat was gone by Survivor Series 88 time. And then you had Bam Bam Bigelow Steamboat left in 88, or the summer of 88, or the fall of 88, showed up in the NWA in 89. I'll talk about 89 in future videos. Then you had Bam Bam Bigelow, a guy that was on WrestleMania 4. He was not on SummerSlam or Survivor Series. Bam Bam Bigelow basically was in the WWF from 87 to spring 88 or summer 88, and he was gone. He only lasted about a year and a half, or maybe 16 months. Bam Bam Bigelow was only in the WWF for. He left, and Bam Bam Bigelow showed up at Starrcade 88, and he worked a match with Barry Windham that I'll talk about in a minute. Survivor Series 88 card was, you had the team, I believe Ultimate Warrior was the team captain, and he was the Intercontinental Champ. Ultimate Warrior and his team was Sam Houston, Owen Hart as the Blue Blazer, and Brutus Beefcake and the Ultimate Warrior and Jim Bronzell against the Honky Tonk Man's team. Honky Tonk Man, Bad News Brown, Greg Valentine, Ron Bass, and Danny Davis in a Survivor Series elimination match, 5-on-5 elimination match. And it went 17 minutes, 50 seconds. It was a decent match. It was entertaining, but it wasn't that great. But there it is. Ultimate Warrior survived. And I think somebody else from his team, maybe 2 or 3 guys on his team, survived with him. So Warrior got put over. That was the right decision because he was the Intercontinental Champ, and they wanted to put him over and get him over more and more. Up next, you had a giant tag team elimination Survivor Series match. You had, I believe, 5-on-5. Let me see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams against 5 teams. So 5-on-5 tag team elimination Survivor Series match. A lot of guys were in this match around the ring. You had 4 teams on the outside on the ring apron. A lot of teams were around the ring. It was kind of hard to follow the action in the ring because so many tag teams standing on the ring apron. It's pretty ridiculous, but it was cool. It was cool at the same time to see all those tag teams on the ring apron. Basically, all those teams involved in one match. That was pretty damn cool, I thought. Teams were all the baby faces. I'll talk about first. The Powers of Pain were baby faces during Survivor Series 88. The Powers of Pain teaming with the Rockers, the Young Stallions, the Hart Foundation, and the British Bulldogs. Just a little fact, Survivor Series 88 was the last pay-per-view you had the British Bulldogs on, in the last WWF pay-per-view ever that the British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid, and Davey Boy Smith ever team up. They didn't come back. At least Dynamite did not come back. British Bulldog returned in 1991, or at the end of 1990, to the WWF alone and became a singles star. But even when British Bulldog came back, he wasn't even back for long. He was back in 91, and he was on Royal Rumble 92, and then he disappeared. And I believe Vince fired him because of whatever he was taking. He was busted with a drug test in 92, and he didn't even work WrestleMania 8. But Bulldog was there for maybe a year in 91. Anyways, who cares? I'm not talking about 91. So those were the babyface teams against the Rougeau brothers, the Demolition, the Los Conquistadores, the Bolsheviks and the Brain Busters. The Brain Busters jumped from the NWA after I think they lost the NWA tag titles in September, and 2 months later, in November '88, the Brain Busters, the Four Horsemen, basically Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, went to the WWF, and they were on Survivor Series. '88 was their first pay-per-view. The Brain Busters basically showed up on Survivor Series '88, and they started working, and they came, and they jumped from the NWA to the WWF, and they were in the WWF for about a year, and then they went back. At least Arn Anderson went back to the NWA. Tully disappeared because he had drug problems, and he couldn't get hired in NWA. So the Brain Busters basically made their WWF debut at Survivor Series '88 in that giant 5-on-5, 5 teams against 5 teams elimination match. And the baby faces, the Powers of Pain, Rockers, Young Stallions, Heart Foundation, British Bulldogs defeated all the heel teams. You had 10 tag teams were in that match. I can't even name 10 WWE tag teams at the time because they don't have 10 tag teams. They probably have maybe 6, at least 5 or 6. Counting the Usos, I don't know how many. You got Usos, Los Matadors, Lucha Dragon, Cesaro and Tyson Kidd, Primetime Players. That's only 5 teams. Well, 6 plus the New Day. So 6 tag teams they got. Back in the late 80s, the WWF had a ton of tag teams. As I counted, they had 10. And the British Bulldogs left in '88 at the end of the year. So they had 9 tag teams left. That's a lot of tag teams. In the late 80s, in the WWF, was great for tag teams, and it put tag teams in the main events, and tag team wrestling was at its high in the late 80s, in my opinion. So, next Survivor Series elimination match. Andre the Giant's team. I believe Andre was a team captain. Andre the Giant, Dino Bravo, Rick Rude, and Harley Race and Kurt Hennig defeated Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I believe Hacksaw was a team captain of his team. Defeated Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Jake the Snake, Scott Casey, Ken Patera, and Tito Santana in 30 minutes and 3 seconds. And that giant 5-on-5 tag teams elimination match went 42 minutes and 12 seconds. It went very long because you had so many guys involved, so many teams involved. 42 minutes watching that entire match of all those tag teams felt like it went over an hour. It went on very long, and it went on too long, but it was a pay-per-view, and I'm sure they wanted the pay-per-view to be 3 hours long, so basically 42 minutes was not that bad if you only have 4 matches on a pay-per-view like they did back then. Okay, Andre's team defeated Hacksaw Jim Duggan's team. So there you go. The last Survivor Series elimination match was the Mega Powers, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. And their team was Coco Beware, Hillbilly Jim, and Hercules. Defeated Haku, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, Akeem, Terry Taylor, and the Big Boss Man in 29 minutes 10 seconds. That was basically the main event of Survivor Series '88, the last match. So it was the main event. And the Mega Powers, both were the sole survivors, maybe with someone else. Maybe with Coco Beware, I don't remember. Good end to Survivor Series 88. Survivor Series 88 is a good show if you're an old school fan to watch on the network. Now I'm going to talk about Starrcade 88 from the NWA. Starrcade 88. First, I'll talk about Clash of the Champions 4 because it took place before Starrcade 88 in December. Where is this goddamn? Okay. Clash of the Champions 4 took place December 7th, 88. And Starrcade took place December 26th, 88. So it was like 3 weeks after Clash 4. Clash of Champions 4, you had the Fantastics defeat Ron Simmons and Eddie Gilbert for the U.S. Tag Team titles. In the finals of the U.S. Tag Team title tournament, the Fantastics won the U.S. Tag Team titles. Steve Williams defeated the Italian Stallion. Who the hell's the Italian Stallion? I don't know who he was, and I don't care who he was. Glad Steve Williams defeated him. Italian Stallion sounds like a jobber. Ivan Koloff defeated Paul Jones when Paul Jones in the match had one hand tied behind his back. Road Warrior Animal defeated Dusty Rhodes by disqualification. And the Road Warriors at the time, before Starrcade 88, were working as heels. So, when they attacked Dusty Rhodes on TBS, they attacked the American Dream. And then one of the Road Warriors untwisted one of their spikes off their shoulder pads. I believe his Animal untwisted it, and then both Road Warriors jabbed the spike into Dusty Rhodes' eye. Basically tried to take his eye out and injure his eye for good, and it was pretty violent. Of course, they didn't stick the spike. They didn't really stick it in his eye, but it looked like they were. As a kid seeing that, I was pretty freaked out, and I thought it was real, and I was pretty shocked, but it was not real, but I believed it was, because in 88, I was only 5 years old, in December 88. So that was pretty damn violent to do that on TBS, and then after the refs and wrestlers came in the ring, Sting came in to break it up. Bam Bam Bigelow came in to break it up. Road Warriors ran out of the ring. Dusty Rhodes was all bloodied under his eye, and he basically cut himself above his eye. He bladed. So he was bleeding on TBS. That did not happen very often, that you would see blood on cable television in wrestling at the time. So you had Road Warrior Animal defeat Dusty Rhodes by disqualification at Clash of Champions 4. And Clash of Champions 4 is on the network if you want to check it out. There's not very many matches on the show, and a lot of them were pretty boring, I'm pretty sure. I haven't watched Clash of Champions 4 in years and years. Main event was Barry Windham and Nature Boy, Ric Flair, the Four Horsemen, at the time, defeat the Midnight Express in the main event of the Clash of the Champions 4. I'm sure it was a good tag match. All four guys could work and were great workers. Ric Flair, awesome worker. Hall of Fame main event talent, without a doubt. I don't care what anybody says about Ric Flair or people that bash Ric Flair and say he did the same moves and had the same match with everybody for over 30 years. I don't care. Ric Flair is awesome to me. Barry Windham, great worker, superstar Hall of Fame talent. Bobby Eaton, Hall of Fame talent, should be in the Hall of Fame. Stan Lane, great worker, should be in the Hall of Fame also. Now I'm going to talk about Starrcade 88. Freaking old pages of this book. See, it says NWA, WCW on pay-per-views. All these pay-per-views are listed. And this book is falling apart. It's a 1998 Wrestling Almanac. And it's beat the F up. Pages falling out of it. Having to tape the pages of the book because it's falling apart. But all the ink is still here to read. So that's a good thing. Starrcade 88. You had Steve Williams and Kevin Sullivan of the Varsity Club at the time. I believe they were called. Defeated U.S. Tag Team Champions, the Fantastics, to win the titles from the Fantastics. So basically the Fantastics only held the U.S. tag titles for 3 weeks, and they dropped them to Steve Williams and Kevin Sullivan on to the next match. Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, the Midnight Express, defeated Dennis Condrey and Randy Rolls. Randy Rolls and Dennis Condrey were basically the original Midnight Express, I believe, before Bobby Eaton was in the group with Dennis. So you had the new Midnight Express beat the old Midnight Express. That was basically the storyline. And Jim Cornette stood alongside Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane for the match against the old Midnight Express. And that match, and the old Midnight Express were managed by Paul Lee Dangerously, as everybody should know that is a wrestling fan, was Paul Heyman. And that match went 17 minutes, 26 seconds. That's pretty long, and I don't remember it being very good, but I'm glad the new Midnight Express got the victory. That was the right call. Next, you had the Russian Assassins, two big guys with masks on. I believe they're red or yellow masks. Take on and defeat Ivan Koloff and the Junkyard Dog in 6 minutes and 47 seconds. Ivan Koloff was very past his prime in this match. JYD was he just worked for the WWF in '88. I believe he had drug problems. I don't know why the WWF let him go. I guess they thought he wasn't in his prime anymore. He lasted in the WWF from 80, maybe the middle of 84. He came in, I know he worked WrestleMania 1. JYD basically lasted in the WWF for 3 to 4 years. And then the NWA signed him, and he worked Starrcade 88. And Ivan Koloff and JYD teaming up, that is not a good idea and was not a good idea. And they should have not been a tag team. Nobody on this earth would want to see them two team up. Pretty dumb. And the Russian Assassins defeated them. So that tells you right there what the NWA thought of JYD and Ivan Koloff. Rick Steiner defeated Mike Rotunda to win the television championship in 17 minutes 59 seconds. So Rick Steiner of the Varsity Club became the new TV champ. And then you had Steve Williams and Kevin Sullivan of the Varsity Club win the U.S. tag titles. So big night at Starrcade 88 for the Varsity Club. Barry Windham, U.S. title match. Barry Windham was the U.S. champ, defeated Bam Bam Bigelow from the WWF. Basically, he came in and he only worked Starrcade 88. In 1989, Bam Bam was gone out of the NWA. I believe he went to Japan, and then he returned in 1990 to WCW. And the NWA was WCW after late 88. Basically, they'd start calling themselves World Championship Wrestling. And I have this little fact. The date Ted Turner bought the NWA, if I can find the page. What the fuck? November 88, Ted Turner purchased the NWA from Jim Crockett Promotions, renaming the NWA World Championship Wrestling. So, November 88, Ted Turner bought the NWA, and they became WCW, basically. Back to Starrcade 88. Barry Windham defeated Bam Bam. It was a good match. I was entertained by it. In that match, Barry Windham defeated Bam Bam by a countout. And it went 16 minutes. Up next was Dusty Rhodes and Sting teaming up to challenge the Road Warriors for the NWA Tag Team titles. Very entertaining match. Crowd was really into it. And Sting got the crowd on their feet. He had a ton of charisma, and Sting was super over in the match. He did a dive over the top rope onto one of the Road Warriors. The crowd loved that. I believe he also dove off the top rope to the floor on one of the Road Warriors. Crowd loved Sting in the match. Dusty Rhodes was still very over, but he couldn't do much. He was really fat, and basically, Dusty put himself in the match, I'm sure, but who cares? So, Sting and Dusty defeated the Road Warriors by disqualification, so the titles did not change hands. That was a good tag match for a Starrcade. 4 absolutely great Hall of Fame talents in Sting, Dusty, and the Road Warriors. World Champion NWA World Title match. Ric Flair was defending the World Title against Lex Luger, and it was a good match. And they had a match at the last pay-per-view, Great American Bash 88. Starrcade 88 was a good match also. Flair brought the best out in Lex Luger. Lex Luger did not have many good matches at all in his career. He worked good against Ric Flair. He looked good against Flair, and he looked good against Brian Pillman at a Halloween Havoc 89. And then Luger had a good match against Sting at Super Brawl 2 in 1992 from my hometown of Milwaukee. Anyways, Luger did not have very good matches at all in his career. He was not a great worker. Basically, he basically became a star because of his body and how he looked. And because it was the late 80s and every guy was on the juice just about and had just too many goddamn muscles, and everybody was on the juice in the late 80s. And Lex Luger had a look, but he couldn't wrestle worth a damn. So, Flair defeated Lex, and it went 30 minutes and 59 seconds. It was a good main event for Starrcade 88. Luger was in the Horsemen in the 87 with Flair, so to have them feud in '88 made sense. And they had to put Luger in those main events against Flair to make Lex a star, because NWA needed young stars. And they had young stars in guys like Sting and Sid Vicious, and Lex Luger was a young star. And then in '89, Brian Pillman came in. He was a young star. And a few others. Z-Man was a young star, but he wasn't that over. Anyways, that was Starrcade '88. I talked about some Saturday night's main events. I didn't mention all the matches, and I didn't mention every show. You can check it out on the network if you have the network. And I talked about Survivor Series '88 and Starrcade '88, and I talked about the WWF being worth $100 million in '88, and the NWA was purchased in '88 of November by Ted Turner. So that is the end of my videos for 1988, the year in wrestling. If you watched any of my videos, thank you for watching. I'm always on Twitter during live wrestling shows, tweeting, so check me out on Twitter at TNAWWGuy and at NXTWWGuy. Twitter is great for live tweeting. There's a lot of cool people I talk to on there. And anyways, this is the end of my year in wrestling 1988 videos. I will start the year in wrestling 1989 videos in about a week. I'll have part 1 of 1989, the year in wrestling video, up on this channel. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If no one watched it, that's fine. Peace out and bye for now. Have a great weekend, everybody.